Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something huge. We're trying to crack open the personal operating manual of one of history's most fascinating figures.
We are. We're not just talking about philosophy as a theory. We're looking at the raw, private notes of the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius.
And the goal here, our mission, is to synthesize all 12 books of his meditations. We want to pull out his personal guide for living a focused, rational life.
Exactly. And what makes this so unique is that these were never meant to be published. He was writing them for himself, probably in a tent on the cold German frontier while fighting a war. It's Stoicism under the most extreme pressure imaginable.
So it's not a polished treaty. It's a look inside his head, a kind of cheat sheet for keeping your internal peace when the external world is, well, literally on fire.
It really is. And the text itself, it doesn't ease you in gently. There's this incredible sense of urgency right from the start. He's not just suggesting you do this stuff. He's telling himself, and by extension you, that you need to start right now.
And it's not for the reason you might think. It's not the typical, you're going to die soon argument.
No, it's much more unsettling than that. He raises this point in Book 3 that should honestly shake you out of any complacency.
So he's not just saying, hurry up, your body's on a countdown. What's the real threat he's worried about?
He's telling himself to hurry, not just because death is coming, but because his mind, his ability to think clearly, to analyze, to understand things, to be rational, that faculty might fade before his body gives out.
Wow, okay, so the fear isn't just dying. The fear is living on after your rational self has already died.
That's the terror, the clouding of the mind, the loss of that intellectual grasp. He sees that life is being used up every single day, and that the window of opportunity to clear the clouds from your mind has a very real set limit.
That completely reframes the whole seize the day idea. It's not about your calendar running out of pages, it's about your mind running out of clarity. The real failure isn't dying. It's failing to become who you could be while you still have the mental horsepower to do it.
It's a really specific and powerful motivation. And it leads him to this very direct command, a sort of rebuke to himself that feels, incredibly relevant today in our age of just constant information.
Right. What does he say to do?
He tells himself to stop wandering, to give up the thirst for books.
Which is a bit ironic for us doing a deep dive on his book.
It is. But his point is to stop the endless intellectual window shopping, the constant consumption of knowledge just for the sake of it, and to focus on actually saving yourself while you still can. He's saying, look, you have enough information. It's time to execute the plan.
I love that. So
Yeah.
if the rational mind is the thing we have to protect at all costs, where is it? And how do we build the defenses? Which brings us, I think, to the first pillar of his manual, the idea of the mind as an impregnable fortress.
Yes, the discipline of perception. He starts by dissecting the self almost like a surgeon. He breaks it down into 3 components. You've got the body, the breath, and the directing mind.
And he's not a big fan of the first 2, is he? The way he talks about the body in book 2 is almost disdainful.
It is. The body, for him, is just this messy collection of nerves and arteries. It's a temporary vessel. It's going to decay. The breath is just wind. You suck it in, you push it out. It's fleeting.
But the directing mind, that's the key. That's
Wow.
the only part that he says is truly your own. It's the sovereign component.
The Stoics had a technical term for it, the hegemonikon. It's the ruling principle. And its unique property, as he gets into in Book 11, is that it's self-aware and self-shaping. It can choose, it can judge, it has moral agency in a way that your body just doesn't.
Your body can get sick, it can be imprisoned, it can feel pain.
Yeah.
All of that is subject to fate. But the mind, the hegemonikon, is totally autonomous.
Totally. He says its life, unlike, say, a play that gets cut short, is always complete at any given moment as long as it maintains its integrity. That power to shape itself, to judge correctly, that's where all inner peace comes from, no matter what's happening outside.
Okay, so that idea directly feeds into what is maybe the most practical Stoic advice ever. The ability he talks about in Book 5 to just wipe away a troublesome thought and return to perfect calm. How does someone actually do that? Especially an emperor in a crisis. That sounds impossible.
Well, he does it by first redefining what a retreat is. He looks at what people normally do. They run off to a house in the country or by the sea, to find some peace. He talks about this in Book 4.
He's basically calling out the entire Roman vacation industry.
He is. He says that's a sign of weakness. You're just running away. The most effective, the quickest retreat is always available because it's inside your own mind. You can access it on the battlefield, at your desk, stuck in traffic.
It's such a modern thought. We spend so much money and energy trying to buy peace through, I don't know, retreats or distractions, and Marcus is saying it's free. It's right there, wherever you are.
It requires zero equipment, and the mechanism to get there is the absolute core of Stoicism. He hammers this home over and over. External things cannot touch the soul. They just can't.
So all the disturbance, the anger, the fear, that all comes from inside.
It comes only from your internal judgments about those external things. So if you hear someone say something nasty about you, the event is just sound waves hitting your eardrum. The suffering only starts when you add the internal judgment. That person harmed me, or their opinion matters.
So you remove the judgment, and the hurt just disappears.
Exactly. As he says in Book 4, the universe is change. Your life is judgment. If you are in control of the judgment, you're in control of your life. That's the whole game.
And that separation, that refusal to let what other people think get inside your head, that's what makes the mind an impregnable fortress, like he says in Book 8. If you detach, nothing can really wound you.
That's his resilience. The mind, when it's not being yanked around by passions or the need for validation, is unassailable. Your body can be hurt, but your moral and rational choice remains your own.
But it's so hard to stay detached when, the world is practically designed to seduce us, to appeal to our vanity and our desires. So to guard this fortress, Marcus develops this pretty brutal mental technique, this reductive analysis.
This is where the Meditations gets really clinical and, yeah, kind of shocking. It's his method, mostly in Book 6, for fighting off temptation and ego. The goal is to see through the shiny surface of things to what they really are, transient and often kind of shabby.
Let's get into the specifics, because this is where it feels so raw. He's not just saying don't be greedy. He literally dissects the things you might be greedy for.
He does. He's trying to neutralize the emotional charge. For you, the listener, he'd say, look at that fancy roast meat on the table. Don't see a delicious meal. See it for what it is, the dead body of a fish or a pig.
That'll kill your appetite.
Or that expensive vintage wine the Roman elites loved so much. It's just fermented grape juice.
And what about the purple-edged rope? I mean, that's the symbol of his power, the imperial color.
He reduces it to sheep's wool soaked in shellfish blood. By breaking down the ultimate symbol of power into its, frankly, disgusting biological and chemical parts, he stops it from inflating his ego. He reminds himself, I'm just a guy wearing dyed wool. That's it.
It's an intense way to weaken desire. And then there's the most famous, or maybe infamous, example, his description of sex.
Yeah, in Book 6, he just brutally boils it down to the friction of a membrane and a spurt of mucus ejected. It's intentionally stark, it's unromantic, it's designed to inoculate his mind against being ruled by passion. Clarity for him comes before everything else.
Okay, but let me push back on that for a second. Isn't there a danger there if you reduce everything, pleasure, love, human connection, down to just friction and chemicals?
Right.
Don't you risk becoming a cold, unfeeling machine? Is the goal of the fortress just to be emotionally dead inside?
That's a really good question, and it's a common misunderstanding of Stoicism. The goal isn't to kill all feeling, it's to kill unnecessary destructive passions. The anxiety, the lust, the resentment. Marcus isn't trying to stop enjoying a meal or loving his family, he's trying to stop being controlled by those things.
So it's about indifference, not apathy.
Precisely. Enjoy the wine when it's there, but don't be tormented when it's not. The joy he's after is a rational appreciation of what's good and natural. It's a joy that comes from inside, not one that depends on external glamour.
I see. So the discipline of perception is about seeing the world exactly as it is without all the marketing and cultural baggage, so you can maintain control over your choices.
That's it. But that kind of clarity, it's a double-edged sword. Because once you strip away the glamour of wealth and power, that same radical vision forces you to confront your own microscopic place in the grand scheme of things.
And that leads us right into the second major section of his manual.
Yeah.
This acceptance of destiny and the sheer scale of time.
Right. Once you've established that your mind is sovereign, the very next step is humility. You have to face the totality of existence. He constantly advises himself to keep this massive, almost overwhelming picture of all time and all space in his mind.
It's instantly humbling. I mean, in Book 10, he says that every single thing, your entire life, your biggest achievements, is a mere fig seed in space and a turn of a drill in time.
Just think about that imagery for a second. A fig seed, a single turn of a drill. He's trying to make you feel profoundly insignificant, but in a way that's actually liberating. If you're just a tiny seed in this cosmic garden, why are you so worried about some petty squabble at work?
And this transience applies to everything. In Book 9, he describes existence as a torrent sweeping everything away. Nothing lasts. Everything is just flowing from one state to another.
And this torrent is the great leveler. He comes back to death again and again. He reminds himself that the greatest conquerors in history, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and the wisest philosophers, Socrates, Heraclitus, they all end up in the exact same place.
Right, there's no special VIP exit for the rich and famous.
None. They either get absorbed back into the universe or they're just scattered into atoms. It's over. He even reminds himself of the pathetic, unglamorous ends of some of these great figures, like Heraclitus dying covered in cow dung. The point is that death is just getting off the ship. It's not a tragedy, it's just the end of the voyage.
And with that perspective, the whole idea of seeking a legacy or fame becomes, well, completely absurd.
Utterly empty. Posthumous fame is meaningless because it depends on future generations who are themselves going to die.
Exactly. In books 3 and 7, he calls fame oblivion. He compares it to drifting sands that just keep covering up whatever came before. You work your whole life for immortal recognition, but that recognition is just being built by a bunch of mortals who will also be forgotten. It's such a sobering thought.
It is. He's constantly reminding himself that human lives are like leaves on a tree, just scattered by the wind. And this applies to everyone. The people who praise him, the people who curse him, even his own family. They're all short-lived. The sheer amount of time he spends rejecting the desire for fame tells you how powerful a temptation it must have been for him.
So once you've really internalized this total transience that you're a fig seed in a torrent, then the next logical step is to accept whatever happens to you during your brief time here. This is the heart of Amor Fati, loving your fate.
Right, but first you have to accept that change itself isn't bad. It's necessary, it's beneficial. He asks himself in Book 7, what can ever come to be without change? Wood has to change to become heat for your bath. Food has to change to nourish your body. Change is the engine of the universe.
Okay, but the really hard part is when that change shows up as suffering, as disease or loss or betrayal. That's where his philosophy gets really demanding.
That's the ultimate test. And his reframe for this, which he lays out in Book 5, is extraordinary. He says you must welcome these events, not just tolerate them. Why? Because they have been prescribed for you by the nature of the whole for the health of the entire universe. They're like a doctor's orders.
So the universe is the great physician.
Exactly. If a doctor prescribes you some bitter medicine, you don't get angry at the doctor. You take it because you trust it's for your own good. Marcus is saying you have to extend that same trust to the intelligence that governs the cosmos, what he calls providence. If it benefits the whole, it must in some way benefit you as a part of that whole.
Which means that if I get angry or resentful about my suffering, I'm not just making myself miserable. I'm doing something spiritually wrong.
Yes. In Book 2, he uses this incredible analogy. He says, a soul that resents what happens becomes a tumor on the universe. It's an unnatural, cancerous rejection of how things actually are. To complain is to cut yourself off from the very source of your being.
But how can you genuinely welcome pain? I mean, that sounds less like philosophy and more like some kind of delusion.
The welcoming isn't an emotional, yay, I'm in pain. It's an intellectual acceptance of necessity. It's the deep realization that if the universe is rational, which is a core Stoic belief, then nothing happens without a reason. So your job isn't to fight the external event. That's impossible. Your job is to change your internal relationship to it. The pain might still be there physically, but the suffering, the part that comes from your judgment and resentment, that can be eliminated.
And death itself is the final test of this acceptance.
It is. He says a rational person should await death with a cheerful mind. It's just another natural function, like being born or growing old. It's simply the final dissolution of your elements. It's the end of your body's slavery to its physical needs and pains.
So this whole section really hangs on his conviction that he is a tiny part of a much larger rational whole. And because of that, he can't resent anything that the whole assigns to him because the whole is always acting for its own benefit.
Exactly. And that big picture view makes his incredibly complex life as an emperor much, much simpler. It lets him just ruthlessly focus on the only things he truly controls, his character and his actions in this very moment.
And Book 12 gives us that perfect, tidy summary of how to live this way, breaking down a good life by its relationship to time.
It's the ultimate simplification. He says, leave the past behind you, entrust the future entirely to providence, and direct the present moment solely toward two things, reverence and justice.
Let's break those down. Reverence is loving your lot, right? Is amor fati in practice. And justice is what? speaking the truth, doing your duty.
It means the only thing that matters is right now. And right now should be spent being grateful for your place in the universe and acting with complete fairness and goodwill toward every other human being you interact with. If you can do that, your life is complete no matter how long or short it is.
That strong focus on justice and interaction with others leads us straight to the third pillar of his operating manual. If you've mastered your perception and you've accepted your destiny, the only thing left to do is act. And for an emperor, action is always social action.
This is where it all becomes real. Marcus knew that all the philosophy in the world was worthless if it wasn't put into practice. And that's all summed up in maybe his most famous line from Book 10, "No more roundabout discussion of what makes a good man. Be one."
I love that. Just stop talking about it and do it. It's a total rejection of just being an academic. But we know from his writing that this was a real struggle for him, right? Especially in those cold, miserable camps.
Oh, he documents that struggle so clearly. In Book 5, he describes that fight with himself in the morning, not wanting to get out of his warm bed. He literally has to argue himself into getting up to do a man's work, because that's the purpose of his existence. Social action. He asks himself, was I made for this? To huddle under the blankets and keep warm.
He compares himself to an artisan,
Right.
someone who loves their craft and can't wait to get to it.
Yes. He's saying duty shouldn't feel like a burden. It should be a source of purpose and even joy. And this all comes from his core belief that humans are, by nature, social creatures. For Marcus, being rational means being social. We were made for each other, like your left hand and your right hand. We're built to cooperate.
And that imperative gives him what he sees as the only two things really worth doing in this chaotic world. He lays them out in Book 5.
In a world he calls full of murk and dirt, he says there are only two things of lasting value. First, to worship and praise the gods, or universal nature. And second, to do good to other people. That's it. That is the entire job description for a human being. Everything else is just a distraction.
He takes this so seriously that he actually defines injustice as a form of impiety. It's a sin against nature itself.
It is. In Book 9, he's very explicit about this. Since nature made us for each other, to help and never harm, anyone who acts unjustly is sinning against the oldest of gods, the principle of truth and universal law.
So injustice isn't just breaking a human law. It's a kind of cosmic crime. You're misaligned with the whole universe.
You are. And he points out that the person who lies or acts unjustly harms himself first by making himself morally worse. The damage you do to someone else is, first and foremost, a corruption of your own directing mind, your own hegemonicon.
So if your purpose is to do good, how are you supposed to go about it? Should you be looking for credit? For people to call you the good emperor?
Absolutely not. He's a huge advocate for what you could call unconscious virtue. He uses these beautiful natural analogies in Books 5 and 7. The goal is to produce good acts the way a vine produces grapes, or a bee makes honey. You just do it without thinking about it, without making a big deal about it. It should just be a natural result of your character.
And he's really clear that you shouldn't be looking for anything in return. He says in Book 7, when you've done a good deed and someone else has benefited, don't look for a third thing. Praise, or a thank you, or a favor in return. That's what a fool does.
Right. The reward for doing a just act is having done a just act. That's it. And the source of this goodness, he says, is always inside you. He tells himself, dig inside yourself. There's a spring of goodness there that's ready to gush out at any moment if you just keep digging. You don't need to import it from anywhere else.
And for someone who is clearly struggling with his own identity, with the overwhelming power of being emperor, he actively urges himself to claim his virtues, to define himself by his character, not his job title.
Yes, in Book 10, he makes a list. He tells himself to claim the titles good, decent, truthful, in mind clear, cooperative, and independent. He's defining his own success criteria. And if he fails, if he loses one of those internal titles, his job is to get back to them as quickly as possible. His character is his most precious possession.
This internal focus is so important because his actual job meant he had to deal with a constant parade of, well, difficult, frustrating, and sometimes actively malicious people. So how does his manual tell him to handle all the antagonists?
It starts with a daily mental workout. It's a crucial exercise he describes in Book 2. He starts every day by forcing himself to imagine all the people he's going to meet. The meddling ones, the aggressive ones, the ungrateful ones.
So instead of trying to avoid those people, he starts his day by making a list of them.
He does. But right after that comes the most important part. He reminds himself, they act this way out of ignorance of what's truly good and evil. And we were all born to cooperate like our two hands. So he must not hate them or get angry, They're just misguided.
That idea of kinship is the antidote to anger. You see their error as a mistake in judgment, not as a personal attack on you.
And he uses two really powerful analogies for dealing with social friction. The first one, in Book 11, is the branch analogy. He says a person who cuts themselves off from another through hatred is like a branch that's been chopped off a tree. They've severed themselves from the community.
But there's a hopeful part to that analogy, isn't there? Which feels a little unusual for Stoicism.
It is. He says that unlike a real tree branch, a human has this divine gift, the rational soul, that allows them to grow back, to rejoin the whole. It's possible to repair the connection, but, he warns, if you keep cutting yourself off over and over, it gets harder and harder to rejoin. The wood gets scarred.
And the second analogy is more for day-to-day practical avoidance.
Oh.
The one in Book 6, where he compares dealing with difficult people to a boxing match.
It's so practical. He says, look, if your opponent in the ring accidentally butts you with his head or scratches you, you don't fly into a rage. You don't assume it was a malicious plot. You just keep your distance. You adjust your guard. You treat difficult people in life the same way, with a kind of good-natured avoidance, not with suspicion and anger. Don't let their fouls become your problem.
And finally, there's this profound tolerance he develops, which he gets into in Book 9. When he's offended by someone's truly shameless behavior, he says you should ask yourself a very specific question. Is it possible for there to be no shameless people in the world?
And since the answer is obviously no, in a vast, chaotic universe, you're going to have all kinds of people. That realization should lead to kindness, not anger. It's irrational to demand the impossible. You should just adapt your mind to the reality that flawed people are part of the scenery. Expecting perfection is the real mistake.
That level of mental preparation and tolerance is essential if you're going to maintain your integrity, especially when you're the most powerful person in the world. It all seems to lead to this final, most personal part of his manual, how to maintain integrity against the temptations of absolute power.
For Marcus, the ultimate enemy was always internal corruption. It was far more dangerous than any barbarian army. He warns himself over and over in Book 6 against becoming Caesarified, or dyed in purple, basically, stained by the arrogance and luxury that came with the job.
He knew he was always in danger of losing that simple, good person that philosophy was trying to build. He had to keep fighting to be simple, pure, and a friend of justice, even when everyone around him was probably flattering him constantly.
He draws this really sharp contrast in Book 8 between the great conquerors, Alexander Caesar, and the great philosophers like Diogenes and Socrates. The conquerors, he says, they took over the world, but they were slaves. They were slaves to their ambition, to their passions. The philosophers, living simply, were masters of their own minds. That, for him, is the only conquest that matters. Self-conquest.
He even uses the very idea of military glory, the cornerstone of Roman identity, to tear down the concept of ambition. There's that other reductive analysis in Book 10, the vanity of hunting analogy.
It's just savage satire. He starts small. A spider is proud to catch a fly, then he scales it up. Men are proud to hunt a hare or a fish, or boars or bears, or Sarmatian prisoners. And then he asks, are they not all just bandits? He reduces his own military triumphs, the very source of his power, to a kind of glorified pest control.
That is the peak of self-correction. And if someone does actually wrong you, his advice for revenge from Book 6 is just perfect. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy.
The focus is always on protecting yourself internally. If you respond to their malice with your own malice, you've let them win. You've let them dictate your character. By staying just and calm, you keep your integrity, which is the only real prize, and you deny them a moral victory.
Now, to succeed at this, Marcus really leaned on the lessons he learned from other people. Book 1, his acknowledgement of debts, is amazing because it shows you the real-world people who helped build his character. It's not just abstract theory.
That section is so crucial. It makes the whole book personal. It shows that virtue isn't something you're born with. It's something you learn by watching and imitating good people.
So what were some of the key lessons he picked up from his family?
He starts with his mother. From her, he learned piety, generosity, how to avoid wrongdoing, not just in action, but even in thought, and maybe most importantly, a simple way of life. She taught him to stay away from the extravagance of the rich. From his father, he learned integrity and manliness. Those were the foundational virtues.
And then his teachers gave him the philosophical tools. Rusticus, for example, basically handed him the keys to his entire worldview.
Rusticus was absolutely instrumental. He's the one who gave Marcus his copy of Epictetus's Discourses, which is the core text of practical Stoicism. But he also taught him to constantly work on his own character, to avoid showing off his learning, and to read carefully. He taught him to write simply, which is the exact style we see in the Meditations.
I love the little details, too. He says one tutor taught him how to endure pain and not get obsessed with the chariot racing factions. Small habits that build attachment.
Those small habits are everything. If you can't control your attachment to a sports team, how are you going to control your reaction to a military disaster? These tutors gave him the building blocks for everyday self-discipline.
And then you have figures like Maximus, who was like a living, breathing example of Stoicism in action.
Maximus was his role model for resilience. Marcus admired his self-mastery, how he was always cheerful even when he was sick, and how he just did his duties without complaining or trying to impress anyone. He showed Marcus that this philosophical ideal was actually achievable for a real person.
And finally, his adoptive father, Antoninus Pius, who was his direct model for how to be an emperor without getting Caesarified.
Yeah, he spends a lot of time on Antoninus. He praises him for sticking to decisions once they were made, for being totally indifferent to empty honors, for having no conceit. He handled everything with this calm, organized energy, always focused on the common good. That example proved that great power and quiet virtue could go together.
So after building this whole manual, after mastering perception, destiny, and duty, and learning from these examples, the final part is all about preparing for the end. How does he sum up the mental toolkit you need for that final phase?
In Book 9, he boils it all down to 3 disciplines that have to be active at all times. First, calm acceptance of everything that happens externally, that's perception. Second, justice in all your own actions, that's action. And third, making sure your impulses are always aligned with your social nature. Those are the 3 tools you have to keep sharp.
And these tools have to be ready to go instantly, like a trained fighter. That's where that incredible boxer analogy from Book 12 comes in.
It's such a vivid image. He says your principles should be like a boxer's fists. Always ready, always clenched, prepared for anything. Not like a gladiator who has to stop and pick up his sword after the fight has already started. You shouldn't have to go looking for your beliefs when a crisis hits. They should be your default stance.
The implication being, if you have to pause and think about how to be virtuous, you've already lost.
Exactly. The reaction has to be instant. And it has to come from character, not from passion. And he uses the lamp of truth analogy to describe how he wants to maintain that character right up to the very end.
It's a beautiful image. A lamp just shines until the fuel runs out. It doesn't flicker or fade. Its radiance is constant until it's gone.
And in the same way, he says your truth, your justice, your self-control, they shouldn't fail before you do. Your integrity has to be sustained right up to that final moment of dissolution. There's no retirement from virtue.
And when that moment finally comes, what's the mindset for the final exit? How does an emperor, or anyone, leave the stage?
He sees life as a play. It doesn't matter if it's 3 acts or 5. The playwright nature, God decides the length. The only thing that matters is your attitude when you leave. He tells himself to depart without any grievance, with this final, peaceful thought. Go then in peace. The God who lets you go is at peace with you.
It's a remarkably calm and powerful end to a life of constant struggle, both inside and out. The entire manual is designed to make sure you can walk off that stage with your integrity intact.
So, as we wrap up, we've basically gone through Marcus Aurelius' entire operating manual. 12 books of raw, private notes on how to save himself. The core takeaway is that true luck, true good fortune, is something you make for yourself. It's found in good inclinations, good impulses, and good actions.
It's all about separating that sovereign, directing mind from your body, from what other people think of you. And it's driven by that urgent need to live a rational life now before your mind starts to decay.
And in the process of all this self-observation, Marcus noticed this deep, fundamental paradox about human nature. It's in Book 12, and it's a real challenge to how we all think about our own lives.
This sounds like the perfect provocative thought to leave everyone with. What's the paradox?
He couldn't figure out why everyone loves themselves more than anyone else. We're all naturally self-interested, and yet we value the opinions that other people have of us more than we value our own self-judgment.
Wow. We know ourselves best, but we'll prioritize the opinion of a stranger who knows nothing about us. That's the modern condition in a nutshell, isn't it? Our integrity held hostage by external validation.
He even takes it a step further with this brutal thought experiment. He says if a god ordered you to speak every single thought you have out loud, the second it pops into your head, you wouldn't be able to stand it for a single day. Why? Because we're more terrified of our neighbor's opinion of our inner self than we are respectful of our own judgment of that same inner self.
The fear of being truly seen outweighs our private commitment to being good. That's the ultimate test of whether that fortress is really impregnable.
So the final thought we'll leave you with is this. What would your immediate self-judgment be if you were forced to speak every thought you have out loud right now? And how much of that private self-judgment is currently being held hostage by what you think other people might think of you?
A deep dive into the blueprint for self-salvation. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.